Hello everyone and welcome to another incredible game from round 11 of the FIDE Candidates Tournament. It's Fabiano Caruana versus Liren, both of them, as you know, former members of the 2800 Club, and whenever I talk about the clashes between these two gentlemen, I always say how they are one of the most exciting games, the most complicated games, and that it's just impossible to calculate everything that happens when Fabi and the Ding play. So this game is no exception. You guys will enjoy it. Let's dive straight into it, and then we're going to discuss about what this means for the standings. So before we check it out, here is a nice photo of the two of them. I like it that it's from the side. It's not from the actual side where the photographers usually stand. It's from the other side, so you don't have all the corporate logos, as I know you guys really hate those, and you can see the playing hall and everything, and just the general setting. You see they are avoiding eye contact, just ready for the fight to begin. And I don't know, I really like Ding's shirt color. I think it suits him very well. So definitely for a former, not a former 2800 player, he's even a current 2800 player. But yeah, that's what we get from the photo. And now it's Fabi to move. He opens with pawn to e4. We have e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5, going for the Ruy Lopez, and now a6, going for the Morphy's defense. Bishop to a4, we have knight to f6 and castles. Bishop to e7 and rook to e1. So by now you're probably already wondering, will we finally see the martial attack? Pawn to b5 attacks the bishop, bishop to b3, and now castles. And this is the legendary position where if white plays c3, there is no player in the world that does not play d5. Martial attack will definitely happen. However, Fabi goes for the anti-martial variation and he plays a4. So that's one of the popular ways to decline the martial. The other you can push the h-pawn, but we will not be seeing c3 here. So here we have bishop to b7. This is the standard way to approach this anti-martial variation. d3, d6, and now bishop to d2. We have queen to d7, developing the queen, connecting the rooks, knight to c3, and now knight to a5, attacking the bishop here. So bishop to a2 and pawn to b4 now. Attacking the knight, knight to e2, and pawn to c5. We have knight to g3, going after that f5 square, but just rook a to b8. So again, all been played before, nothing new here. However, the known ideas here are c3 and the immediate knight to f5. But Fabi prepared something else. Fabi plays knight to h4, and it is now, as of move 15, that we have a completely new game, and it's a very exciting position. So the thing is, of course, the knight, the knights want to come to the f5 square, so Ding has to play g6 to prevent this, but Fabi doesn't mind. He plays bishop h6, chases away the rook, rook f8, and now knight h to f5. And can you grab this knight? Well, not really. If you grab the knight, then knight captures on f5, and you can't really stop queen f3, queen g3, and it's game over. So the knight, for the moment, cannot be captured, and the Ding just plays bishop to d8. It's definitely the best move. If you go bishop to f8, which kind of seems like you're getting rid of some of the attackers, Fabi can play bishop g5, and then after bishop g7, defending the knight, we just capture it, and after bishop captures, now knight h5, and this is definitely all within Fabi's preparation. So if Ding went for this, it would be bad news. You're threatening knight captures here. This just wins the game. If you capture, then again, queen gets access to all of the attacking squares, and if you move the bishop, then we give a check, and now we pick up the f7 pawn. King f8, bishop captures on f7. Again, I hope you did not forget about our good friend, the light square bishop. And, well, against Fabi, you pretty much resigned this. So Ding plays bishop to d8, a very important defensive move, as you'll see later on. Knight to g7 by Fabi, attacking the rook, and now rook back to f8. And here, we could just see a repetition, but Fabi, of course, he did not have the greatest of time in the last 3 games that he played. In the last 3 games, Fabi lost 2 games and drew 1, so he really needs a win. But yeah, you could, I guess, repeat here rook e8. We just repeat knight g7, rook f8, and it's a draw by repetition. But Fabi plays h3 first, and now pawn to b3. Now Ding closes this diagonal, and he says no repetitions for you. So okay, bishop captures on b3. b3. You could also capture with the pawn, but it's not all that impressive. The knight will come to c6, then to b4, then go after the bishop. This way, at least you grab a pawn. So bishop captures on b3, knight captures, pawn captures, and the bishop to c6 now. Going after the b3 pawn. If the white queen moves, we have rook to c1, and now king to h8. Preparing knight to g8 to kick away the bishop from the h6 square, and now Ding has to go for it. Knight to e6. He attacks the rook here, and Ding plays queen captures on e6. And this is in fact the absolute strongest way to refute the idea because of what happens next. So queen captures on e6, Fabi grabs the rook on f8, but now bishop to a5 attacks the rook and attacks the bishop on f8. So it's better to give up the exchange than a piece. Bishop back to h6, bishop captures on e1, queen captures, and now just rook captures on b3. We have queen to a5 by Fabi going after the a6 pawn, and now knight g8, kicking away the bishop, bishop to e3, and the bishop to b7. And now you have this position where after all of this madness, it's dead equal material. The only thing that's different is that the bishops are of opposite color, but other than that, it's equal material, no doubled pawns, no imbalances in the position, so this is one hell of a game. So here, queen back to d2 by Fabi, now pawn to f6. Just improving the position. We have f4 by Fabi, and now e captures on f4. Bishop captures g5, pushes away the bishop, bishop to e3, and now queen to e5, attacking the knight here. So knight to f5, it's an excellent square for the knight, and now knight to e7. Offering a trade of knights, Fabi goes for it, knight captures, queen captures, and now queen to c2, attacking the rook, rook to b6, and now rook back to f1. So now Fabi wants to organize an attack against the Ding's king. He's putting pressure on the f-file. He wants to remaneuver the bishop over to c3 to grab hold of this diagonal, and then it's only a matter of fully activating the queen. And sorry about that. And as we still have bishops of opposite colors, of course you know that once this dark square bishop starts attacking, the light square bishop cannot oppose it, and of course it works the other way around. If this bishop becomes super active, then the dark square bishop is useless in helping out with the defense. So here, king to g7. I actually guessed the move correctly. Sorry about that. And now a5, chasing the rook away. Rook to c6, and now bishop to d2. We are bringing the bishop over to this diagonal. Rook to c8 by Ding, bishop to c3, and rook to f8. We have to set up a defense here as the f6 pawn is attacked. So queen to f2, adding another attacker, but it's not a problem. We are defending it 3 times, and now h6. We have h4. Fabi trying to open up the position a little bit. Bishop to c8. Ding has to figure out how to activate his light square bishop. Pawn to b4. Now, as you know, you can break through here, but you can open up the b file and then maybe bring your rook, somewhere on the queen side to try and infiltrate this way. So bishop to d7. B captures on c5. D captures, and now rook to b1. We have bishop to b5, not allowing this infiltrating move with the rook, and now h captures on g5. H captures and queen to f5. So putting more and more pressure. Now the threat is queen captures on g5, as the f6 pawn will not be able to capture back. So king to g8 by Ding, and now pawn to d4. Fabi just keeps pushing forward because, there's just nothing for him backwards. Bishop to d3 now, attacking the rook and the e4 pawn twice. So rook to e1, and now c captures on d4. We have bishop captures on d4, and queen to h7. Offering a queen trade. Ding Fabi not yet convinced that he wants to call this a day. Queen to f3 attacks the bishop, and the bishop back to b5 by Ding. We have e5 now, pushing even further, and now comes queen to d7. Interestingly, if you play f captures on e5, it's just a problem because queen to d5 check, and there's no good move for you to make. If rook to f7, queen captures on e5, and this is just impossible to defend. The dark square bishop and queen battery are now too strong. Rook can come to c1, rook can come to c7 if needed, also to c8 if the rook, for example, moves to f8. So you're not going to be able to defend this. So after this e5 move, we have queen to d7 by Ding, and now we have bishop to c5, going after the rook here. So rook to c8, attacking the bishop, and now queen to b3 with check. Queen f7, blocking check, and now Fabi pushes the pawn all the way to e6, creating a beautiful pass pawn. So queen to c7, and now pawn to e7, seemingly offering a bishop here, but not really. For example, because it's check from the queen, so you can't capture the bishop on c5. So king to g7, and now bishop to d4. Putting pressure again on this f6 pawn, and the pawn is nicely defended. So how can Ding play this? Well, queen to f4. And now he wants to bring the bishop to c6, put pressure on this pawn, put the rook on h8, put the queen on h4, and then go for some checkmating ideas here. So here we have bishop back to e3, attacking the queen. Queen to e3 is the safest move. You want to trade queens here and then just call it a day, but Fabi still wants to try. Bishop to e3, he attacks the queen, but now he allows this very, very annoying queen to g3 move. Attacking the rook, also you can't really move the bishop because the queen on b3 hangs. So what can you play here? Well, queen to b4, we have to move the queen and defend our rook here, but now rook to h8. You could also go for bishop to c6, first attack the g2 pawn, and then only when the queen defends the pawn, then we try to bring the rook over to h8, but Ding goes for it right away. We have rook to h8, and now comes e8 queen by Fabi. The reason you give up this pawn is because there really isn't a move you can make here. It's such an ugly position, and you have to be careful. If you play something like bishop f2, you might even get a mate in one, as the light square bishop is covering the f1 square. So there really isn't a move you can play here. So e8, bringing a queen into the game, queen to h2 with check, king f2, and now rook captures on e8. And now comes queen to g4. The problem is if you go for queen to g4, then Ding has all sorts of moves ready. The last chance for Fabi was bishop captures on g5. This is giving up a piece, but it kind of forces a draw, because after, let's say, rook captures, queen captures, and f captures on g5, you will get some sort of a perpetual here. It's gonna be impossible to avoid all the checks. But okay, here we have queen to g4, and now we have queen to e5 by Ding. And now you don't have all that many tricks here. Now you can't even give up the bishop or anything, as the e1 square will be under fire from the rook and the queen. So here we have queen to d4, offering a queen trade. The problem is, even if you play something like bishop d2 to guard the rook, a queen c5 check is just deadly. You don't have a good square for the king. You have to go up the board, and after king g3, let's say queen d6 check picks up the bishop. So you have to be very, very careful here. So queen to d4, basically a forced queen trade, and now queen to f5 with check, king to g1, and now king to g6. Ding keeps the queens on the board and improves the position of the king. We have queen to d2, and now bishop to c6, putting pressure on this g2 pawn. Bishop to f2, now offering a rook trade, and queen to g4. Now just threatening checkmate, so you have to be very careful again not to play something like this. So queen to d3 with check, bishop to e4, now attacking the queen, and queen to g3. Again, offering a queen trade, but now Ding happily accepts it, as his position is better here. It's not yet all that winningly clear, but if you go back, for example, queen e6, Fabi can just play queen to c3, and then it continues. We can even try and repeat this. So instead, Ding trades here. We have bishop captures on g3, and now pawn to f5. Very scary, pushing those pawns in front of Fabi's king. Bishop to c7, and now king to h5. King f2, we have king to g4, and now rook to c1. We have rook to e7 by Ding, putting pressure on the bishop, and just rook to c3. And here we have rook to d7. Also very interesting is just bishop to d3, but it's an incredibly complicated move. Of course, you never want to trade here, and if bishop d6, for example, you attack the rook, then we go after this e2 check, and then the king is in trouble. You don't really have all that many good squares. If you play king to g1, we just play rook to d2, and now there is not all that much you can do. Bishop is coming to e4, and you're not going to be able to defend everything. So that's one of the ways you can do it. Ding tries the other way. He plays rook to d7, and now Fabi plays g3. That's why it was a little bit better, because the pawn here was a target, and now it no longer is. However, bishop to d3 by Ding, bishop to b8, and now bishop to b5. And here, it seems that Fabi thought it was just going to be a repetition of moves. He played bishop back to c7. A move like rook to c2 keeps Fabi in the game, but after bishop to c7, which seems like an attempt at a repetition, it actually completely blunders the game for Fabi. But it's not, completely easy to spot why. However, feel free to pause the video and win the game for Ding while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting that Fabi cannot defend against both threats. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook to e7. That's the good stuff. And now there is no defense against both rook to e2 check and rook captures on c7. And you can't defend against both. For example, if rook to c2, simply preventing rook e2 check, we're going to play bishop to d3. And now where do you move the rook? If you move it somewhere weird, we're just going to capture the bishop. And if you play, well, there's no good move you can play. If you're going to have to play something like this if you don't want to allow rook to e2. So here, rook d2, rook captures on c7. We go for a trade, and it seems like, yeah, okay, you're just down a pawn, but there's a rook c2 check. King f1, and now rook to a2, going after the a5 pawn, and you can't really defend against everything here. You have to keep an eye on this pawn, and you have to keep an eye on this pawn. You could try rook d5 though, now trying to maybe if king captures, go after this pawn, but still just f4. It's a very, very easily winning position. The king is coming, the pawn is coming, and that's just the game. So that's one way to do it. The other way, well, there's just no good other way. The other way is bishop to d8, the one that Fabi tried, but even this will not do. Now the e2 square is free for the rook to occupy. We have rook to e2 check, king to g1, not going for some nasty discoveries here, and now rook to d2, and there is no way to stop bishop d3, bishop to e4, and you will either get checkmated or you will suffer severe material loss. Bishop to e7 was played, now comes bishop to d3, and he was in this position on move 78 that Fabiano Caruana resigned the game, and a very, very tough second half of the tournament for Fabi, who was co-leading with Yanni Pomnici in the first half of the tournament, but now out of the last 4 games, Fabi lost 3 games and only got 1 draw against Yanni Pomnici, which is I don't think Fabi ever had such a losing streak. It's just incredible for him. Whereas Ding, I believe, gets his 3rd victory in a row. I will check if it's in a row, just not to trick you guys. But yeah, after all of these draws, yeah, this is his 3rd victory in a row. He defeated Duda, Rapport, and now Caruana. Incredible stuff. 2 victories with the black pieces in a row. Incredible. And of course you resigned here because after you make a move, let's say bishop to d6, you have to play something. We're gonna play king to h3. Okay, now you're defending the pawn, but what now? Rook to c1, you have to play something. Rook to g2 check. There's even this. King h1, bishop to e4, and here you resign. There's nothing you can do. Whatever you play, rook captures on g3 will be checkmate, as the bishop will deliver checkmate. And if you try something like... well, there's just nothing good you can try here. If you play rook e1 to try and give up the rook for the bishop, just bishop f3. And if rook to e3, now we just capture on g3, deliver check, and the only move is to give up the rook, captures, and that's it. Of course, the position is completely winning. So yeah, after bishop to d3, Fabi resigns, and a brutal victory for Ding Liren. Here are the standings after round 11, so you guys are informed of what's happening. Nepo still leading the tournament with quite a convincing lead, 8 points out of 11. That's incredible. I mean, 3 more games until the end of the candidates tournament, and Nepo just crushing it with 8 out of 11. And now, after winning 3 games in a row, in second place, Ding Liren with 6.5 points. Still a full point and a half behind Yanni Pomnici. Hikaru with 6, and Fabi now only with 5.5. A whole 2.5 points behind Nepo. Rajabo with 5, Duda with 4.5, Rapport 4.5, and Alireza Firuja with 4 points. And Nepo still needs to face, I believe, he still needs to face Duda, he needs to face Rapport, and he needs to face Hikaru. So it's not going to be easy to take him down. If Hikaru by some chance wins against Nepomniachtchi, which is definitely a possibility, then Ding will have real chances of winning the candidates tournament. But if Hikaru doesn't beat Ding, it's gonna be Nepo all the way, I believe. So yeah, and just so I don't forget, here you have a very nice photo of Ding after the game. He's just enjoying the view, obviously, somewhere maybe in the hall, maybe already pondering on the next game that he's going to play. Is there a chance for him to win the candidates tournament? It's no longer, up to him. If Nepo just continues playing brilliantly, then there's nothing he can do. But if he got 3 wins in a row, if he can get 3 more wins in a row, then he might get very, very close to actually winning the candidates. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoy it. Tough break for Fabi. Definitely a terrible second half of the candidates tournament. But what are you going to do? So yeah, once again, really hope you enjoyed it. I would like to wish a very happy birthday to Nashi, and I would like to thank Clever Piggy, Odolin Ferdi Forever, and Michael Hope Consulting, and Alan Chevalier Moore for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the candidates until it finishes, and we finally have a challenger to Magnus Carlsen, or maybe to someone else. See you soon.